Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our second New South Wales Family Daycare Association webinar in the PD in Your Pocket series for 2020. So as you know, we have decided, or New South Wales Family Daycare Association has decided to continue the series and continue providing professional development in the PD in Your Pocket series free for educators. So that's fantastic news. And we're very excited to be here with you this evening for another great session. My name is Elizabeth and I am your facilitator for this evening. I'm really excited to have a great evening with you all. I hope you're all somewhere dry and warm. It looks a bit cloudy here or a bit rainy here this evening. So I hope you've all got some nice snacks and a cup of tea. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you now. Okay, hopefully you can all see the slide there. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country we meet on today. And I know we are meeting on many different lands with many different traditional owners, but New South Wales Family Daycare Association is presenting the webinar from the Gadigal country. And it's important that we remember that long before your current community was established, that Indigenous people have their own communities on the land where your family daycare service is. Indigenous people are still the traditional custodians of the land your community is on. So it's really important this evening that we recognise them. As an educator, it's important that you establish and build links with the local Aboriginal community wherever possible so that the children also can connect with the Aboriginal community. And we will discuss how we can do that this evening. Although symbols used in Aboriginal artwork change from area to area, symbols such as the one on the slide here are often used to depict concepts of community and family. Okay, so before we get started on tonight's content, I just want to do a little bit of a refresher and a run through on how PD in Your Pocket works, just in case anyone's forgotten since the last series. So the first thing that happens is you all would have been sent your booklet or the link to the specially prepared booklet. You would have got that last week, and that gives you time to read through this however you like to do that, on your phone or your iPad or your computer. If you didn't receive it, you can find the link on the screen here, so you can click on that link and you can read that in your own time. If you're listening to this as a podcast, the link is www.nsw.org.au/pdinapocket/community. So you can get access to that booklet. Now, the second stage of PD in the Pocket is this evening. So tonight we're going to get through some really great content. You'll either be participating now as a live webinar or watching it as a video or listening to it as a podcast. If you're participating live with me now, remember that you can always go to the PD in a Pocket page on the website and watch or listen to it later if there's anything you want to hear again. So if you do want to go over anything that we talk about this evening, you will have access to that. For those that are participating in the live session, we are going to, as usual with our usual format, we're going to have an interview after the presentation, and that will go for approximately half an hour. And that this evening, the interview is with a family daycare educator. And then after that, we'll have about 20 minutes or so for questions. So plenty of time. At any stage, if you do have a question, you're welcome to pop that into the chat box. And we will keep track of that. Otherwise, as we go, as we watch the interview, you are welcome to also put questions in there. And then the last part of PD in a Pocket, please don't forget our Facebook page. So when you enrolled, we invited you to join a closed Facebook group with other educators and other members of the family daycare community. You can discuss the topic, this topic or previous topics with them, and it's a really great space to collaborate, to network and share information. You can share what you're doing at your service. You can see what other people are doing. And it's wonderful to see that after each session, after each topic, we get so much great feedback and really practical ideas and images of what services and what educators have gone away and implemented. So it is a great space. If you haven't joined that closed Facebook group, please do so. Lastly, if you have any questions at all about PD in a Pocket, you can email info@nswfdc.org.au and we'll be very happy to answer your questions. Okay, so I hope that's refreshed everyone on all the great information that is available. Now let's have a look at tonight's content. There's some great things happening tonight. So all of us belong to communities, and that's what we are essentially talking about this evening. Most of us belong to multiple communities, and some are overlapping and some are very different. So as we go through the session tonight, I want everyone to think about two things in the back of your mind while I'm talking. The first one is, what communities do you belong to? So have a think what communities you belong to. And secondly, how does belonging to these communities impact your identity? So really thinking about how your community impacts who you are. So for example, if I was to think about myself, I know I'm in the community of Sydney or the local community of the North Shore because that's where I live. I also belong to the early childhood community because that is my profession and my passion and where I work. And I have a lot of past colleagues and current colleagues. And that really is my work community. And then you may have lots of other communities. You may be part of a cultural community. So really have a think. Now, belonging to these communities impact who you are as a person. So that's another point we want to think about too. How may you differ from someone else based on the communities that you belong to? Now, this evening, we're going to focus on 6 main questions. The first one is, what is your community? The second one, what is meaningful engagement? That's something we'll look at tonight. How can you make sure the children in your care are involved with the community? So that's something that sometimes gets overlooked, and we really need to make sure that that's happening. How can you overcome barriers to connecting children to your community? So often family daycare educators and even other educators will comment that it can be quite a challenge to get children being involved and part of their community. So we'll look at how we can overcome that. Where can you go within your community? So really looking at physically getting out there with the children and as an educator and becoming involved in the community and really having it embedded as part of your service. And lastly, who are the people that your children should know in your community? So looking at who they know. And you'd be amazed if you did sit down and ask the children in your care who they know in their community, and you might be really surprised what they come up with and what they've actually observed and taken in. Okay, so before we go any further, when people registered for tonight's session, we asked you to answer some questions, and we thought it would be really nice to share the answers with the group before we get into the content. So the first question was about language. Now, as you can see from the graph, 51% spoke another language or languages before they spoke English. So I think that makes family daycare a very culturally and linguistically diverse community. So that was really interesting to see those results come back about language. Now, we then asked, it was important for us to know how well the people engaging in family daycare in PD in a Pocket spoke English. So given that some of our resources and also our presentations are in written English, and 5% of us found it was difficult to read written English. It was 5%, 95% was with difficulty. So that's really important that we take that into consideration and identify that. The other question we asked is, how long have we been educators for? And this was another great thing to see feedback on. So 21% of us have been in family daycare for under 5 years. 5% of us have been in family daycare between 5 and 10 years. 64% of us, and this was the biggest group, has been in family daycare between 10 and 20 years. So that's fantastic to see that this occupation does have longevity, and you know, there's obviously people who really are loving doing it, and they're passionate about it. 8% have been in family daycare between 20 and 40 years, and only 0.5%, or 3 people with us tonight, have been family daycare educators for over 40 years. So that's a fantastic achievement, and well done to you. That's really shows great passion in the industry there. And the last question we had was, how often do we go on excursions? So this is really looking at how often are we going out and getting involved in the community, physically actually going out. So only 22% of us go on excursions often. 39% replied sometimes, 6% rarely, and 18% never. So we're really going to try and change those last 2 statistics tonight. We really want to see people going on excursions in family daycare and getting involved in the community. So hopefully we will inspire you to do that this evening. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone who participated in those statistics and those questions. It gives us really good insight into what's going on. Okay, now let's on to tonight's topic. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is what is your community? Now, as we said, a community is a group of people who are linked by social ties, share common beliefs, or live in the same geographical area. So that first one is quite common to us. We understand that community is about being geographically close in the one location. But it's interesting also to consider those other 2, if you're linked by social ties or if you share common beliefs. Now, a nice way of thinking of community is that it is a group of people who share a common story, one that is so important to them that it defines part of who they are. Now, they build that common story into their senses of who they are and build a history on their community into their own personal history. So think about your community or your communities, remembering we can be part of more than one community. Is your dominant community where you live or your cultural background? It could be your family daycare community. You could have online communities, or it could be a church or religious community. So have a think. For you to be able to connect children to your community, you firstly have to know what is your community, or what are they, being multiple different types. Now, when we try and reflect on the children in our care, it's always a nice idea to think back to when we were a child. So who was a part of our community outside our family before we started school, so that 0 to 6 age group? Do you remember local shopkeepers, storeholders, neighbours, the man that delivered the milk or the bread, family, friends. So really thinking about who do you remember outside of your family in that really young age group between that 0 and 6. So I have very fond memories. We had one of those old-fashioned milk bars at the end of our street. And it was way back when I was 4 or 5, but I still remember his name, the man that ran the milk shop. His name was Rod. And I think I probably only remember his name because he always gave us red frogs in a little white paper bag. But you can see how, you know, children really can remember members of their community and they can make a big impact. So he was a very friendly person that was close to our home, and we would often go there to pick up milk and things, and he would treat us. So don't underestimate how much children really do absorb the people that they see frequently and around them. So when you do think back about what you remember of your community as a child, think about the role they played in their life. So in your life, so think about how important they were to you in understanding the world. Did they teach you things? Did they expose you to new things? Because they're outside of your family, it's an opportunity to be exposed to new things. They may help build your identity. They may help you in understanding that although this is the way things work in your family, there's actually a wider world out there with different rules and different ways of being. So great exposure. Think about how seeing those same neighbours made you feel like you belong to a wider community. So even when we would pull into my street, when I saw Rod's shop, I knew I associated, okay, I'm home. This is my home. So that's what the concept of community is about in family daycare. By virtue of coming to your family daycare, the children are provided care and education, and they belong to at least 2 communities now. So they've got their home, their family, their geographical location, and now they've got their community within your family daycare. So the one where they live and the one where you live. And our aim is to help children feel like they belong to both communities. Now, we know how important that sense of belonging is, and that's something we really want to tap into tonight. And more because we know that they, as an educator, you also belong to many communities, so you can help children connect to things that they may not have had that exposure to before. Now, communities can be made up of people and of places. So place is the one most people think of first. We were talking about that geographical location. So their suburb or their village or their town. So if you live in a big city like Sydney, you probably think of a community as your local suburb. So rather than saying my community is Sydney as a whole, we usually say, well, I'm in the community of Marrickville or Mount Druitt or Blacktown or Mosman, wherever it is. We tend to break it down because Sydney is so vast. Or sometimes a slightly wider area, such as the inner west or the southwest or the northern beaches. There's the Western Sydney, the Shire, eastern suburbs. They can get slightly bigger, so they can be seen as communities as well. Now, if you live in a smaller town, slightly rural maybe, you might think of your town as your community, so Bega or Orange or Dubbo. But communities can also be made up of people. So we don't just look at places as community, it's also people. So we may have the Lebanese community or the Indian community or the Buddhist community or the folk music community or the school community, or as we mentioned, the family daycare community. So this in itself is a community. We have the PD in a Pocket community, and we see that through our Facebook page and everyone present. And that also shows that communities can gather in person or they can gather virtually online, so through social media or applications like Zoom. So what makes up your sense of community? And what makes you feel like you belong to a community? So this is also something I'd like you to reflect on as we go through this evening. What are the things that make you feel like you belong? Now, Rhonda Livingston, you may be familiar with her. She is the National Educational Leader for ASIQA, and she describes having a sense of community as when members of a community experience 4 positive feelings. And I'm going to go through those with you now. So the first one is belonging. So feeling you're part of a community, you're accepted, you're safe, and you identify with the other people in that community. So the first one is belonging. The second one is influence. So feeling you matter. You can make a difference to the community, and the community can have influence on its members and on you. So influence. The third one is integration and fulfillment of needs. So feeling your needs can be met by community. And the last one, shared emotional connection. So feeling attachment or bonding between community members through shared experience, place, or history. So let's look at that through the lens of, say, someone who has immigrated to Australia from Iran. Now, they have a sense of being part of the Iranian community in Sydney. So they belong to that community, and that's where they feel safe. They feel that they can influence that community. They can help people in the community, say, integrate into Australian culture. So they impact on each other and they help each other. They can have their needs met by the community. So it gives them avenues of friendship. They have a shared experience with other members in the community. So they're having to start their lives again in Australia. Now, another reflective point, think about your communities and do these things help make up your sense of community? So once you have one of your communities in your mind, go through those 4 steps of belonging, influence, having your needs met, and sharing an emotional connection. And really think about if you can see those things coming through and playing a part. And when we want to look at community for the children, we need to make sure that those 4 points are being addressed. Okay, so can everyone just take a minute to think about what your communities are? How about you think for a minute or two, and you can write them into the chat box. So if I was to write mine, I would obviously, my community would be in the northwest of Sydney, I guess. I'm in one of those funny areas. I have a yoga community. I have a mother's group community for my young child. I have my work community with New South Wales Family Daycare, and then the broader ECEC community that I'm part of. So I'd like you to have a think, and you're very welcome to share these with each other in the chat box. I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a think, and then we'll come back together. Okay, lots of great responses coming through there, everyone. So thank you so much for sharing that. And it's great to see that there are such a vast amount of communities available that people belong to. So we've got things like the Arabic community. Lots of people are saying their family daycare community. We have Korean community, daycare community, Scouts, SES, fantastic. So there's so many there. So please keep sharing, and I know that everyone can see those coming through. So thank you. Now, something I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation was about our Aboriginal and Indigenous communities. So I'd love to know, do you engage with the traditional owners of the land on which your family daycare is on? So your local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Remember, they are an integral part of our community and they're vital. So you can make contacts with your local Aboriginal community. And if you don't know where to start, you could contact the local Aboriginal Land Council. You could also attend events with the Aboriginal community. If they're having events in your local area, you could certainly join in with those. You can contact your local council and ask them what Aboriginal organisations exist in your area, or you could also try and get access to an elder. Sometimes local councils have an elder that they consult with, and you could see if they would be willing to come and visit you or share some information with you, or if you were looking at implementing something around Indigenous people, you could consult with them and get their feedback on that. So remember, you need to build these relationships one at a time. Be friendly and make a connection. So don't demand anything. Just indicate that you'd like to meet and learn from the Indigenous people in your community. So give them a bit of background of what it is you're after. And you can help the children you educate and care for to learn about these cultures and also their history, because they are definitely a big part of our community. We need to recognise them and we need to include them. Okay, so the second thing we're going to look at this evening is what is meaningful engagement. Because like anything, when we want to implement connection with community, we want to make sure that it's meaningful so that it's not tokenistic, it's embedded, and that we're doing it well. So practice that is informed by meaningful engagement with families and or the community is one of the 3 themes that need to be demonstrated by services to receive an exceeding rating for the National Quality Standard and any standard within the NQS. So practice that is informed by meaningful engagement with family and or community, really important. In other words, family daycare educators cannot be seen to be delivering really high quality education and care unless your practice is deeply connected with the community. So how do we do this? And what does meaningful engagement actually mean? Let's take a look. So the most important 4 elements that make engagement meaningful, I've got them up here on the screen for you. So the first one is it's consistent and ongoing. So that's where we really look at it being embedded. There's no point in taking your children to the local library there once and then never repeating the trip, or never allowing the children to form a relationship with the librarian. So it's not something we just want to treat as a tick box to say, yep, okay, you know, once a year we go to the library, so that's our community inclusion. We must keep doing it to make their connection with the library and the librarians consistent, ongoing, and meaningful. The second point there, it must help children make connections. Now, they need to make connections to the people in the community, but also to the place. So they need to think of that park up the road from you as their park. It's not just a place that they went to for half an hour very quickly and never went there again. They need to be able to see that you have corner shops around you, just like Rod's Milk Bar, and that they need to be able to connect with what happens in your local community. So something else that I noticed my 3-year-old son's got very good at is he recognizes the the numbers of the buses in our area. So we do have buses in our street, but all around our area. And obviously those bus numbers are quite unique to our local area. And he knows when he sees a 545 bus, for example, that's in our area. So it's amazing what the children can pick up. It needs to foster a sense of belonging. So we know how important feeling like we belong is to humans, to everyone, especially to children. So feeling part of a community helps children to feel like they belong. Your communities as a family daycare educator are different than every other family daycare educator's community. So for the engagement to be meaningful, it must be tailored to your community. Remember, as family daycare educators, we're all very unique. We have unique homes, we have unique communities, and we need to show that we're tailoring that. So by really focusing on those 4 points there on the slide, that's how we're going to ensure that we're doing meaningful engagement. Now, why is meaningful engagement so important? This is important because it takes a village to raise a child. And I never really understood this phrase as much as I do now that I have my own child. So communities are key parts of the learning framework, the EYLF and My Time, Our Place, depending on which one you use with your children. So outcome 1, children have a strong sense of identity. Children learn about themselves and construct their own identity with the context of their families and their communities. So this includes their relationship with people, places, and things, and the actions and responses of others. So this outcome tells us that part of our role as educators is helping children to know who they are. They work this out partially by their experiences and in the community. Now, outcome 2, children are connected with and contribute to their world. Now, that's looking very big scale, but we're still looking at community. So experiences of relationships and participation in communities contribute to children's belonging, being, and becoming. So from birth, children experience living and learning with others in a range of communities. These might include families, local communities, or early childhood settings. This outcome happens when children develop a sense of belonging to groups and the communities and an understanding of reciprocal rights and responsibilities necessary for active communication. And I really like that point about reciprocal rights and responsibilities. We must teach children, even at this young age that we care for in early childhood, that they have rights and that usually that understanding comes to them first. But we must also let them know that they have responsibilities. So it is reciprocal. It's a two-way street and they need to contribute. And they learn this first when they first leave the shelter and the security of their home and they go into care for the first time. In family daycare, they go into care and they start socializing with peers of their same age. But then we can expand on that by taking children out into the broader community, like with our excursions. So it's really important that they know that they have both rights and responsibility. So that last outcome that I mentioned, this tells us that part of our role as educators is helping children to belong to a community and understand how they can contribute to the community. So when you do excursions or when you are going out to the community, make sure you put emphasis on not just what the children can get out of the community. Okay, well, we can go to a shop and we can buy something, or we can go to the local playground and we can use the equipment, but make sure you put some emphasis on what they can give back to the community. So if you're going to, you could go to one of those great community gardens that are popping up more and more, and get the children to do some basic weeding or watering the garden. So they're providing a service, they're giving back. They have responsibilities and they're not just taking. Okay, our third point, involving children with your communities. So how can you do it? How can you involve children in the community? Now, element 6.2.3 of the National Quality Standard gives us some ideas. This element says that community engagement, the service builds relationships and engages with its community. So the guide to the NQS describes this element as follows. Services can further support children's sense of belonging by helping them to experience connections and be engaged with the local community. So when services develop respectful and responsive connections with the immediate or the wider community, they're likely to further enrich the educational program. So this goes back to your programming. Inviting members of diverse groups within the community to share their interests and expertise helps extend children's knowledge and assists the service to reflect on the inclusiveness of the practices. And this also broadens children's understanding of the world they live in and contribute to. So building connections and relations with people in the community helps children to learn more about various cultures that exist in Australia. And we know living in Australia, particularly in our biggest cities like Sydney, we're extremely culturally diverse. And we need to embrace that, and we need to make sure that children are being exposed to all different cultures because they themselves are essentially like a community. And this includes knowledge about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' perspectives, identities, their history, their cultures, their places of significance, and their local community. So having opportunities to visit places in the community helps children to form relationships with a broad range of people and build respect and trust in adults outside their immediate family and service. So again, going back to that exposure. So if we break that down, it seems to focus on three main things. The fact that connecting with the community makes your educational program, the experiences that you're setting up for the children to learn from better. So they really improve that. Inviting members of the community to share their skills and knowledge with your children is a great idea. Now, you might want to tap into parents and or extended families, aunts, uncles, grandparents, tap into their professions, get them out to talk about what they do for a job, because that then could link into the local community. Or you could go further afield. You could see who is close to your home, who is close to your service. Look at the shops that you have and ask, if you've got a dentist down the road, ask them, would you mind coming in and having a chat so I can introduce you as our local dentist, or a GP or a fire station or whatever it is, bringing them into your service. And then, of course, excursions. So visiting places in your local community. It's always a good idea. And the picture here is of children connecting with their Indian educators' cultural community and joining in an Indian celebration, Holi, sometimes called Festival of Colours. So that educator has shared her community and her culture with the children, and they appear to be having a fantastic time. So really, again, these children may not have been exposed to that if it wasn't for the people in their community, i.e. their educator. So you can see how that all links together. And there's so many other ways to involve children in your community. If anyone does have any other suggestions of how to get children involved, please, you're very welcome to pop that in the chat box. Or, of course, later on, you can post something on our Facebook page. We'd love to see some examples of what you've done to assist engaging the children in the community. Okay, so point 4, overcoming barriers to connecting the community. Now, we know nothing is without its struggles, and sometimes we do hit roadblocks and hurdles, but we can work together, and especially in nights like tonight, we can network and look at these together and see how we can overcome this. So sometimes there can be barriers that exist to connecting children to the community. Now, some of these include, the first one I want to talk about is fears around safety. Sometimes home feels like the safer place to care for children, and it can be overwhelming and intimidating to take children out of the home setting. So that can be a big barrier. Transport, you may not be able to get very far, especially if you're in a rural or remote area. But even if you're not, even if you're in the city and you just don't have access to getting all the children out at once. Your service policy. So your service may not be keen on you taking children into the community. They may deter you from doing that. Paperwork, it does involve quite a bit of paperwork. We've got to do risk assessments and permission notes. So it can be creating more work for ourselves, and we're already extremely busy. Parents may be reluctant. Parents may just not feel comfortable with the children going out, especially if it's with the educator by themselves, if you weren't able to get any volunteer parents to come along with you. But that could be something to help overcome that. You not being connected with your community. So how do you go about meeting and engaging with the Indigenous community, for example? We understand that these barriers do exist. So how do we overcome them? Most of them we overcome by talking, so we can talk to our service if they're reluctant on excursions. You could embrace the fact that you'll support them in putting together a policy and procedure of how we can implement excursions. Talk to fellow educators tonight. Hopefully tonight you'll get lots of networking done and get some new ideas and inspiration. Talk to families. So if families are reluctant, find out why. Ask if maybe some of the parents would feel more comfortable if someone could come along as a volunteer and come with you as additional supervision or to support the process. Risk assessments and permission slips only need to be done once a year for many of the typical types of excursions. So we can really try and cut down that paperwork if that's a barrier for you. I do have on the next slide here, we've got a bit of an risk matrix. So this is how we look at safety. Now, if you've done a risk matrix and it's coming up, you've got things coming up as a very high risk in that high risk category there, in that red section, then, it might just be a case of going back and revisiting and saying, okay, well, we want to go to the local park, but we're next to a major road. Maybe there's another way we can go. We can go a different way, or maybe we can increase supervision by getting someone to come, like someone to volunteer to come with us, a parent. So sometimes it's a case of just brainstorming and rethinking about how we can mitigate those risks. Okay, and on our second last point for this evening, where can you go in the community? So where to go? This is the fun bit, because really you can go so many places. Can I ask everyone to write in the comment box some of the places that you go in your community with the children that you educate and care for? So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes while you put those in, and everyone can see each other's responses. And have a think, some ideas that I have mentioned tonight, like your library, the shops, community gardens, parks, lots of different options there. So if everyone can put in the chat box some ideas of where you have gone or where you would like to go so that we can share those. And really there's no limit. So I'll give you a minute and then we'll come back together. Okay, fantastic. Lots of great suggestions coming through there. I really liked one of them. I noted I saw someone said school pickup. So obviously you're picking up some children after school and taking the children with you to do that. And I really love that one because it's quite likely or possible that the children in your care may end up at that primary school that you're going to do that school pickup. And that's a great, it's networking for the children so they can see where they may go after they're in your care, where they're going to move on to when they go to big school. So it's that great introduction of showing them what's in their local community, the people and the places. They might get exposed to the teachers at that school. They may be exposed to the environments. They might have a little play on the equipment while you're waiting for the school children to come out. So really great sense of community there. They may meet people that are also going to go to that school. So they start meeting future friends. Yeah, that's a great example. So an example I have on the next slide, we can go to the local bread shop. And I hope everyone's eaten dinner because this slide will make you feel very hungry if you haven't. We know of one educator that takes their whole group to the local bookshop, and then they go to a Thai restaurant every year. So the children or the child or the children that are going to school buy a book to keep at the educator's house with their name in it for future children to enjoy. So that's a really nice continuity of care. That book's there to stay. And because it's a tradition, the bookshop and the Thai restaurant are connected to it. So the children look forward to when it's their time to choose a book. Now, if you have a train in your area, you could jump on the train and go to the next suburb. This could be a regular excursion. You could go and inspect a house being built up the road and have a chat with the construction workers. Sometimes with construction, it can go for months and months. So they're quite an established group of people that may be there for a while. You might get to know them on first name basis. They might give you a little bit of a spiel about the equipment that's being used. Lots of great things that can happen there. You could go and inspect the house being, oh no, we said that. You could go inspect the house being built, or you could go with your children or with other educators, or as I mentioned before, having families come and volunteer their time to support you. So really think about what you can make happen there. Okay, so the last point for this evening is who are the people that your children should know in the neighborhood. So think about the people that are part of your community. How connected are the children you provide care for to those people? Think about the postie, the shopkeepers, the people working in the cafe, the librarians, other educators within your family daycare service, the coordinators, so your family daycare coordinators, each of the child's parents. Do the children get to know other people's parents? Your children and your extended family, people from the wider cultural group. So what about the local fire station or the hairdressers or the person that holds the stop sign at the school, your neighbors? So you may be one of these people that knows everybody, but you may not know many people around at all, but you need to connect children to the people in your community. So again, think back to your childhood. Who were the people that you knew? And how can you create those relationships for children? So really thinking about what part you can play as the family daycare educator. So think about how you can connect children with others. What about a regular play date with another educator? And I saw that quite a few of you suggested that as an option. Is there another educator in your service that you get on well with? Could you meet up with both of the children regularly in the park? Talking to neighbours over the back fence, it may be as simple as that. Going to the local library, which a lot of you also said that you do. It's a great place to go, and it's also a place where your children could get to know the librarians. Talking to people in the community garden, how you connect to the family of the children that you care for. And do they all have one thing in common? They do, it's you. So they all share a family daycare educator. So that is one really good point of similarity that you could connect everyone with. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our presentation session this evening. We're now going to move on to a video. So the person being interviewed, as I mentioned, is a family daycare educator, and her name is Pixie Bea. So Pixie is an educator in the ACT in Canberra, and her service provider is Inspired Family Daycare. She is being interviewed, as usual, by our education and care sector journalist, Lisa Bryant. So this video is on the PD in Your Pocket webpage if you would like to view it later. So I'm going to start this video now. Once we finish the video, as I mentioned, it goes for about half an hour, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions. So you are welcome to pop those in the chat box as the video is playing. If you've already asked questions, we have noted those and we will be sure to answer them. But enjoy the video and I will see you after.
Excited to have Pixie Bea with me. As everyone knows, I get really excited when I can actually interview someone from family daycare, and Pixie Bea is a family daycare educator. So welcome to PD in Your Pocket.
Hello.
Pixie, tell me, how long have you been a family daycare educator?
So I've been a family daycare educator for slightly under 2.5 years, but an educator for 17 years. All of that with my diploma, and my family daycare years have been with Inspired Family Daycare. And I love it. It's like I'm getting to be my best educator self. And
oh wow, that's great.
If I leave family daycare, I'm leaving the sector.
Oh no, I'm
staying, but if I'm ever giving up family daycare, it'll be because I'm leaving the sector.
And why do you like it so much? What's so great about it? Like, I know what's great about it, but
you know what's great about it. I love the relationships. I love that it's this slower paced and more natural connection with children. I don't have to get sent off for a break when I'm in the midst of an experience. I don't have to leave the children who I'm their favorite person because it's the end of my shift or because I've got a lunch break. I don't have to have that hard handover multiple times a day, and it's the children are more relaxed. I can better meet their needs, and I get to do more of the really fun stuff. I get to keep pushing my practice without feeling held back or restricted by other people's expectations. We just get to run with it. The children come up with something off the cuff and we run with it. And that's relaxing. I always have the resources I need to hand because they're my resources. And I get to curate all of that myself. So that autonomy and those
one of the bits that I think is
beautiful.
one of the fun bits, and that is the point of this topic and why we're interviewing you, is I understand that you go on lots and lots of excursions with your children.
Lots and lots of excursions. So we're out of the house on excursions at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times, sometimes pretty much every day. I'm open 4 days a week. And excursions are just a natural, comfortable part of our practice.
Okay, so let me set the scene. What age groups have you got?
My current youngest is 15 months and my oldest is 5. And well, plus a couple of school-age children that we do the after-school run, and my own children who are 12 and 14. So it's one of those things I love about family daycare is the natural family melding of mixed age groups. So the children are constantly learning from each other and learning from children who are a little bit beyond the normal grouping you get in a centre environment.
Okay, so when you go out on an excursion, you're taking a 15-month-old, say.
Yep.
What's your next age group?
I've got a 2-year-old, a couple 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. It's spread all along it. And
are most of your children like 1 or 2 days, or are they 4 days?
I've got 2 that are 4 days a week, and the others are 2 to 3 days a week.
Right. Okay. So it's
so I've got a couple that are 1 day a week as well, but that was because they already had the relationship with me and needed to knock their time back a little bit. So
sure,
it's a mix all the way across.
Okay, so tell me, where is your favourite place to go on an excursion?
See, this is a tricky question. I think my favourite at the moment is the cork oaks at the Arboretum, because it's got that sort of woodland grove feel to it. And there's a couple of fallen trees that are perfect for children to climb. And we often meet up there with the other educators in my service for little playgroup days. It's cool even in the middle of summer because there's some nice dense shade and trees to climb, and we set up a slack line and I bring along art materials and we just chill. And the children are always so proud of themselves for being able to climb further than they did last time. And they tell their families about it and they drag their families out there. So that's my current favorite.
And how far away? You're in the ACT, yeah?
I'm in the ACT, I'm in Canberra.
And how far away from where you live and work is the Arboretum?
Okay, so that's about a half-hour drive. And to get to that spot in the cork oaks, it has about an extra 10 to 15 minute toddle to get to our favourite base.
Okay, now I happen to know what an arboretum is because I live in a suburb with an arboretum, but a lot of people have probably never heard that word. So the way I describe it to people is a living tree museum. Is that how you describe it?
It's almost a zoo for trees because they're all clustered. It's a garden for where they're sort of illustrating all the different types of trees. And we've got, whilst most of the trees at the Canberra one are quite young because they've only been planted since the bushfires in 2003, there's still some of the established trees. The cork oaks themselves are more than 100 years old, and you can see where the cork's been harvested from the trunks. And so there's big trees and small trees, and a children's garden and lots of community type spaces.
Okay, well, that sounds like a wonderful place.
There's a reason why it's one of my favorites.
Yep, and I love the idea of you taking a slack line. There. Would we be able to get a photo of some of your children in that space at some stage?
See if I can send it. I'll check in for permissions, but
that'd be great.
I can edit them to hide faces if I need to.
Why are excursions, as someone that's worked in both centre-based and now in family daycare, why are excursions so important to you as a family daycare educator?
So for me, the excursions are a chance to, doing family daycare, it's really easy to feel trapped and sort of stuck at home. And I chafe at that And I mean, when I was in centre-based care, I was the outdoor educator. So I've always been drawn to being outdoors. But for connection, for me, the getting out on excursions is, it's not having the sound bouncing back in on us from the walls. It's the children having a bit more space. It's the children are coming to Pixie's place and playing with Pixie's resources. But if we all go out to an excursion space, we're all playing with a place that it belongs to all of us. It belongs to our community. And because we're going to these places consistently, it also becomes a connection to country and a sense of ownership and belonging to country, because country owns us more than we own country. And that's by having those relationships and living it and breathing it and loving it, they're more driven to look after it later. And it's something they share with the community, and oh, there's so much good in it. And I just, being outside, I'm at peace. And that
sounds good.
I relax and the children relax, and we're just be in.
And we know that, you know, like scientifically, it is true that being in nature helps us both form new neural pathways in our brain, but it does help slow down our breathing, slow down
a natural calming element to it, especially if you're going somewhere with a trickle of water, or some of the other places we go to have creeks and mud hills and the lake. There's a little beach at the lake in the middle of Canberra that we'll take the children out to.
Your regulator doesn't freak about you?
The regulator doesn't freak out about that, because we do our risk assessments and we talk with our mentors and we go through the legislation really, really carefully. And yeah, the children can explore water without it being, oh, no, they might drown. No, we're watching them. We're there and we're in the water with them half the time.
I think that you'd find in New South Wales that a large majority of services don't let their educators go anywhere near water on an excursion.
Inspired is in New South Wales and Victoria and Queensland, as well as the ACT. And all of our educators get out to those sorts of spaces with the support of our service and with approval from, we've checked in with the legislature, with regulations and with the regulatory authorities to make sure that we're not missing anything. And sometimes it means rewriting our risk assessments, but
that sounds wonderful. Okay, look, we'll get on to the assessments a bit later, because that's the boring part of the excursion.
It's also a fleeting part, because you do it once and it's done. Yeah. And then you get all the excursion bits, and that's fun, and it more than pays for itself. Yeah.
So one of the topic that we're doing this interview as part of, it's not just about excursions, it's about connecting children to community, because I think that increasingly we're putting children in places where they're cared for. And when Mum used to stay at home with the children were a lot more connected to the community. They'd talk to the postie, they'd talk to the milkman, etc.
They'd come along to the grocery to do the groceries.
Whereas I think children now kind of exist in these locked environments, then in cars, then in a home environment. Yeah. So how does your community react to seeing children in the wild?
Okay, so even this week we were out at the Botanic Gardens with our little playgroup, and we saw multiple other people, parents with children who were also enjoying the Botanic Gardens, would notice us and notice the toddlers meandering around, climbing on stuff, poking the water, sitting in the water, dropping things in the water, running, weaving their way between bushes and things. They'd smile. Every single person that went past would see what we were doing and smile. And some of them sat nearby for quite a while and watched us. And you could see that joy in children being joyous. And I've had times when I've encountered families out when we're out and about And I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm a family daycare educator rather than a parent, because I've got my cart, which has my excursion backpack, and I have a bag with all the lunch boxes and the picnic rug, and I'm a bit more stocked up than I'd normally be going as just a parent. I don't want to minimize just a parent because it's not a just. But there's times when, yeah, the mozzies are a bit of a pain here. Do you want someone who want to borrow my insect repellent? Because I've got some in my kit. Or, that child's just had a fall. They're not one of my children, but hey, I've got a first aid kit. Here's some ice pack. Let's get that on there to calmly tend to the child while keeping half an eye on the ones that I'm responsible for. And they really appreciate the preparedness, that willingness to connect with them and to support people in my community whilst I'm doing something I love, and they can just see.
Do the children have a connection with those other people? Like, you know, not just randoms.
They'll often strike up play with whatever children we encounter. We don't tend to go to places that are crowded at the moment with COVID challenges, but the children just naturally fall into play with each other, like children do anywhere.
And what about with other adults, like, you know, the shopkeepers?
When we're, oh my goodness, they have to wave to the rubbish truck drivers. If I could learn my local rubbish truck driver names, I absolutely would. But they'll often strike up conversations with people that we see regularly. The last couple of years, it's been harder to have those sorts of excursions because we've been having to avoid going to indoor places with what the regulations have been doing with their advice. But yeah, consistently going to the bakery or things like that, they start to get to know places and people and connect and belong to it.
Yeah, sure. And do you, like, I know some educators, when they take their children out, they'll put them all in a red T-shirt or something. No, nope. You don't. No,
nope. I know which children are mine. I know which children are mine. I know their hats because they're their regular hats. I know these children. And that's one of the core parts of being a family daycare educator is I've got a small group and I know them all really, really personally.
Yeah.
I mean, you know them when you're in a centre-based environment too, but you're doing a lot more behaviour management and the constant on alert.
That's it.
Yeah, they don't need uniforms. They don't need fluoro jackets. They're just being children.
So what is in your kit?
Oh, okay. So the things that I have to have, I've got my nappy change stuff and the first aid kit, which has to meet the list, and a change of clothes, which I try and keep really minimal. I'm one of these over-prepared people. It's got the contact detail, paper copy of contact details for the children and the parents, and there's a list of requirements.
Your phone doesn't work.
Just in case the phone dies. I've also got a battery pack for my phone in there, and that's part of my over-preparedness. The extra stuff it includes a multi-tool, because then I've got a blade, scissors, pen, pins, whatever I need. I've got cables and notepaper, and I've often got a mini art kit, and it evolves according to what the children are into. And
zip lines sometimes.
There's a couple of things that I've added over time that I particularly love, like hanging from my excursion backpack is so it started with doing the school run on foot, and I had a couple of rings on my belt, and the children would sort of argue over who was getting to hold the rings on my hips, and they'd all just be kind of crowded in around me, and it was just a little bit too claustrophobic for me. So I got some bright bangles and stuck them on a stretchy bit of rainbow elastic and hooked that onto my excursion pack. So now they hold a rainbow ring. I've since attached those to the cart as well as the excursion backpack, and they know that they hold the rainbow ring, and that's how we get around when I need them close by.
And when you say your excursion cart, talk to me about that. What's that?
Okay, so mine's a beach cart. From using it for the last year or so, I aim at getting one with all rubber tires rather than the plastic with a strip of rubber on it, because the wheels are bit annoying and they're starting to crack a bit. But it's a fold-up cart, so it fits in the back of my car, and I unfold it and I can load in. I could fit 4 children in there if I really had to. I have hauled it with 2 toddlers and 3 toddlers. Yeah, I've got photos of me hauling it with 3 toddlers and 1 on my back and preschooler toddling alongside, sort of thing. It helps carry stuff, so we can
I've got one of those trolleys as well, and I know what you mean about get the ones with better wheels. I don't know why I bought the Kmart one, but I bought the Kmart one, and the wheels. I'm
going to replace the wheels because I'll work that out, and it'll means it doesn't become junk. I'm a big fan of repairing stuff and puzzling out a way of hodgepodging it together.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. So what, give us an idea of other places that you go on excursions.
Okay. Another of my favorites is Black Mountain Peninsula, which is on the shores of Lake Burley Griffin. And so Lake Burley Griffin in Canberra is a manufactured lake. They put in a dam and to fill it up, and it's this very idyllic, pretty place. But Black Mountain Peninsula has a river sand beach and an enclosed children's wading area and it tells you it doesn't get beyond this depth, so that we know that's a pretty safe zone for the children to wade. We check it out before we get there. And so that gives us some lake beach water type play. Another one that's a favourite, it's out of mobile reception, so we actually put in for funding, we applied for a funding grant so we could get a satellite phone for our service and won the grant. And so we now have a satellite phone that we share use of, and we go down to Woods Reserve, and it's got a creek, it's a campground, so there's a toilet block there, and it's got slopes and steps and bushland and a creek that's generally cold with rocks that they can climb on and wade in the water and drop rocks in the water because it makes a satisfying splash. And so that's another favorite. I do go to playgrounds as well, but I prefer the really wild natural places because there's more room for the children to put their own story into what they're doing. And
do you ever take children to supermarkets or post offices or those kind of?
The last 2 years has been tricky with COVID, but we've had to avoid the indoor places. But yeah, we walk down to the local shops. We when we're doing the school run, we'd spend a bit of time playing on the school playground that was accessible, because that helps the children familiarize with the school that most of them will be going to.
Yeah, and sure.
Builds part of that connection.
To community, yep.
Yep. Local bakeries and things like that.
Worry about safety issues more when you're out and about? I can hear people going, she lets them drop rocks.
Yeah, of course I do. I let them climb trees, and they're climbing trees so that their feet are higher than my head. But we do the risk assessments and we manage those risks. Yes, there are more uncontrolled risks out there, in that they're spaces that I can't shape the environment. So in my backyard, I can, if there's a spot that's a dangerous fall, I can adjust what soft falls around it, or I can modify it in other ways. Out there, I can't do that. There can be rubbish, there can be broken glass, there can be people walking their dog. I actually feel safer with them out there, because the children are better, because they're getting more practice. They're getting better at regulating their own risk assessment skills. I really love being out. The ways we collaborate as educators when we're out on one of our play groups and the children are climbing trees, and we're talking with the children with, okay, pause for a moment, how's your body feeling? Are you feeling safe and stable? You feeling good? Okay, where are you going to put your hand next? And we're talking them through it. You look like you're feeling a bit worried. How about we stop and breathe for a moment? And then we're going to, once we're calm, we'll be able to work out how you're going to work out how you're going to get back down again. And no, I'm not going to lift you down, but I will help you find the right spot with your feet and your hands, and get your belly on the branch and things like that, so that they can feel strong. And they get better at managing those risks. So the risks become less.
Yep.
And they're challenging themselves and they're more relaxed and they know the rules. They know what's expected of them because they have a few simple rules that they know to follow, and we touch base with them every time we go out, and they remind each other, and it's easier to manage, easier to supervise.
And when you say
easier.
you go out with other educators, how many
Yep.
other educators would you go in a group?
Sometimes it's just one, sometimes it'll be 3 or 4 with whatever children we've got.
Right.
It depends on the day. It depends on who's available.
Okay.
We have group chats where we say, my crew have asked if we can go out here. Does anyone want to go out there too? And it really, really helps with the isolation that
Being
is a really common feature for family daycare educators. And our mentors will meet us out there, and that's their favourite part of the job.
So by mentors, do you mean coordinators?
Coordinators, yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yep. So some educators that will be listening this may well have never taken a child on an excursion at all. The child is dropped at their home and picked up from their home, and that's it. Others, may do the school run to pick up other children, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yep.
What would you say, to an educator that is too scared to take children on excursions?
Okay, I know the common advice here would be to just give it a go. But for me, when I was thinking about this, my advice would actually be to find a place where you feel at peace. Find a place somewhere out there that you feel relaxed and that feels a bit curious and content and happy. And if it feels at peace for you, then share that with the children. Because this is a place that feels good in your emotional well-being. This is a place where there's trees or open sky, or maybe it's somewhere that you've taken your own children with to when they were little, or if it's somewhere with some fond memories, or it just looks interesting. And if it sparks that little bit of wonder of, I wonder what the children would do here, or I can see this particular child doing that in that space, give it a try. You can always, your coordinators are there to act as a mentor, as a support person. Put the idea to them, ask for some help, and visit it again, visit it a couple of times if you need to. But go somewhere where you feel at peace, because that's where you'll relax most.
Yeah, I love that advice, and I think that's really good advice.
And it's also a good idea to sort of seek out a service that is in line with that sort of philosophy if it's something you want to try.
Sure.
I've gotten so much of that with Inspired. It's beautiful.
Just talking about the boring stuff, how do you feel with the regulatory requirements? Okay,
so our mentors, coordinators are really on top of what the regulations actually say. If a question comes up, if the regulations change, they pick through it with a fine-tooth comb. They run it past us too, so we're all having input into puzzling out what this stuff means and how we're going to implement it as a service. But yes, there's a series of checkboxes that you need to follow, but they're not insurmountable. And once you get used to managing them, it becomes easy. So we do a risk assessment for every excursion that we're going on. We try and keep to a small collection of regular excursions with intermittent other places that we'll go to, because that's better for forming relationships, and it means you're not doing risk assessments constantly. Those get renewed every 12 months. Families sign permission forms whenever you bring in a new risk assessment for a new location, or every 12 months. And then you just go. So there's checkboxes we do need to follow. With the changes to the rules about transporting children in vehicles, we developed a Google Docs for checking children in and out of the car to make sure that nobody got left in the car, make sure we haven't lost anybody. which sometimes feels tedious and ridiculous, but it's an important thing to protect children, so we make it happen.
Yeah.
For me, I did up a template risk assessment that we use benefit risk assessment more than just risk assessment, because the benefits are so much more than the risks, and all of the risks are manageable. And that's part of the point of doing a risk assessment, is to work out how you're going to deal with the potential problems that come up. So I did a basic template for myself of going to urban areas, going to bushland areas, and going to a combination of the two. And I use those templates and then tweak it to suit where I'm going. And that simplifies the paperwork process. I send it off to my mentor. They read over it, highlight any bits that I need to think about or adjust, and approve it. Send it off to families, and most of them go, "Yeah, we trust you. Sign it off and go."
Yeah, look, I actually like doing risk assessments myself, because it enables me to go, what is the worst thing that could possibly happen in this scenario?
Yep.
And then once you've thought,
it's a good reflective practice.
You can take it out of your head.
Yep.
Because
you stop worrying about it, because you know how you're going to manage
what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but you might get a bit bored with that. So is there any tips or tricks that you'd like to share with other educators about, doing excursions?
So I have two ones that I use with the children. The first is the rainbow rings that I described earlier. They know they've got to hold on to the rainbow rings if we're crossing a road, or if we're in a busy area where I just need to feel like they're staying with me and safe. And the other one is cooey. So cooey, you do that and it really carries. And my children all know that if they hear cooey, they've got to call it back and start coming back towards me. They know that if they've ever lost sight of me, and they don't know, I've rarely lost sight of them, but if they're not sure of where I am, they can call cooey and I'll respond it back, and then they can find me. And if they're getting a bit too far ahead because they're an excited toddler who just wants to run, I do cooey. Sometimes it takes them a few seconds to stop, and then they register it and start running back, and they guide each other on it. But yeah, cooey has been simple and effective, and it just helps us together whilst giving them the freedom to just be children doing natural childhood things.
Yeah, that's great. I really hope that people watching this can get as excited as you are about excursions and feel as free as you are about doing them as well, because I think it's really important for children that they become part of our community. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us tonight.
The more you do it, the more fun it gets, and the more you see the best of childhood and the best of the children in your care. They're not at each other's throats when they're outside in the wild. It's the childhood I had, and it's the childhood I want them to have access to that they don't normally.
I want to have a child so you can be their family daycare.
I get that a lot. When we encounter families out there, I often get the question of, so how do I go about signing up? Or do you have any places? I don't. I have a wait list. I've never had to advertise.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Okay, wasn't that fantastic? A big thank you to Pixie and Lisa. That was really a great interview and really insightful into how much we can actually do on excursions and getting on excursions as family daycare educators. So that was very inspirational. We've had some great questions coming through during that interview. So we'll go through some of those now, but if you do think of anything else while we're going through our questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat box now, and I will get to those. So one of the first questions that came through, someone just wanted some clarity about permission forms. So asking if If all the children have a permission form, except for one child, can I still go on the excursion? So unfortunately, no, you will definitely need permission forms for each individual child who goes on that excursion. Another question that came through was about picking children up from school. So if that's done on a regular basis or a daily basis, you're collecting older children from school with your family daycare children. Do you need to do a permission form every day? So no, you don't. You just need to do, it's called a regular outing form. And that one needs to get done once every 12-month period. So you certainly don't need to be doing that every day. And we spoke about that when we were talking about barriers, trying to minimize those barriers and making sure that we're not making things harder for ourselves. We really want to, we're very busy and we acknowledge that. So we want to make this a simple and an enjoyable process. We shouldn't get too tied down or stressed about thinking about, you know, excursions or community inclusion. It's something that should come naturally and that should be really enjoyable. And I think Pixie gave us some fantastic inspiration on how great it can be, and not just for the children, for the educator as well, and for the families, and also for the community. She had great examples of how the community actually benefited from seeing children in the wild, so to say, out of their environments of care and home. So that was really nice. Someone else has come through with a question about how can I prepare children for excursions? And this is a really nice thought, because often, you know, we make sure that we're being compliant and we've ticked all those boxes, and we make sure that we've done all of our paperwork and that the parents and carers are happy. But we don't always think about how we can prepare the children. So some of the things I thought of, and please feel free to add to these if you think of anything else, you can pop them in the chat box. Talking to the children about things like road rules. So if you are leaving the home and going on an excursion, making sure they understand what to expect so that you're empowering them to take on their own safety and make sure that they're looking after themselves. So running through things like road rules. If you are jumping on public transport like a train or a bus, making sure they know what to expect, the process, making sure that, you know, we don't stand up till the bus has come to a complete stop, just things like that, being aware of their own safety. Reminding them to use their manners. So if you are going to a shop or you're going somewhere public, reminding them to say their pleases and thank yous, and say hello and be friendly, that they can say hello to anyone they see in the community. You get involved in or notify them about things like culture or language that they might be exposed to. So for example, if you're going to an Italian restaurant, taking them out for lunch, you might want to teach them a few phrases or words in Italian so that they can really bond with that culture through language. So having a think of things like that. And also I want to touch on, when you come back from an excursion, it's really important and a nice idea to debrief with the children. So to talk about things like, what did you see? Did you see familiar things that you often see, or did you see something new that you'd never seen before? And it could be, what did you see or who did you see? So thinking, going back to place or people, and really going through that with the children. You know, did they learn anything new, and what did they love the most? What was the most enjoyable bit? It could have actually been the walk to the park as opposed to the park itself, which would help guide future excursions, that the children actually really just like walking around the streets and observing and meeting new people. You don't necessarily have to have a destination as such. So I really do like that idea of debriefing. And of course, also as part of your debrief, when you do come back, if you did hit any hurdles, or if things didn't go as expected, or you came across new risks, important to address those. And, you know, you can constantly be improving things for next time. Okay, I think we have one last question. I want to get children involved in the community, but don't know how to get started. So that's a good question to finish up for tonight, because I want everyone to have a good idea of where to go from here. So maybe a good starting point would be to have a group time with the children. So really ask them who they know in their community or the places that they know, and just ask them and say, what are some things or people that you know in your community, and just see what they come up with. And that could be a really good starting point to say, okay, well, children have listed these places. These might be some good places to start with. Another good starting point is to connect with parents and carers. So you could send out a survey and ask them, like, would you be keen on excursions? Would you like to come? Invite them along. Where do their children like to go? So on the weekend, where do you go? Because maybe we could go there. Or maybe another angle would be to say, does anyone in your family, would they like to come along and share their profession, or share, talk about what they do at work, or share their culture? Maybe you have a festival that you celebrate. They could share a craft or a cooking experience, something that they love to do. So if it isn't always possible to get out into the community, talking with the parents and carers and saying, who can come to us and share your community with us? So I hope that, and of course you could also talk with your provider about policies and procedures around excursions, or around community visitation to your service, and seeing if there's room for improvement there, or getting involved in that procedure. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. That does bring us to the end of our session tonight. I hope you've all really enjoyed it and that you've learned a lot. Please remember, again, participate in that Facebook group and read the booklet that was sent out if you haven't already. It's got great tips and information in there. And again, if you haven't joined that Facebook group, all you need to do is open Facebook and type in PD in Your Pocket, and you can join that one, and you will then be part of the PD in Your Pocket community. And remember that Facebook group isn't just about talking about the mechanics of PD in Your Pocket. It's a great place to talk about what you're doing in relation to topics. So if you actually want to share some things that you've been doing at your service about community or any of the other topics, you can revisit those things, and post pictures. It's fantastic to see visuals of what everyone's doing. So thank you, everyone, for participating tonight, or for watching or listening to this session later on. We hope you've gained a lot, and we can't wait to see you for our next session. So thank you, and go and connect your children with community. Thanks, everybody. Good night.